Also, we've got quite a few people in the room today, so please do introduce yourself in the chat. Always good to learn, kind of do a bit of online networking alongside things. It's what we do in person, so we should do it online, I think, as well. So please do introduce yourself in the chat. Keep an eye on that chat box, and I'll be posting useful links as we go along. I think that's about everything from me. If you do have any questions or issues, please do ask us in the chat, and I will be keeping an eye on that. But without any further ado, I'll hand over to Hannah, who's going to run us through everything she knows about websites that she can cram into 50 minutes. Over to you, Hannah.
All right, thank you, Joseph. Yes, hello everybody. My name is Hannah, and today, as Joseph has said, I'm going to be talking about web design for small businesses. There is an awful lot to get into, so I'm just going to crack on and get started. There we go. Be on the right window. So just a very, very brief introduction to who I am. I am the designer, the developer, and the founder of Jorvik Web Dev. So I am a one-woman band. So it's my job to understand everything when it comes to web design for small businesses. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So I studied digital media at university, which led to UI design, which inevitably led to UX design, and then eventually SEO, because there's a lot of crossover with both of those. But I became frustrated with designing these apps and these websites, and I couldn't actually do anything with them. And so I then trained as a full stack engineer, which quite honestly was a bit too much. It was a bit full on, but it did mean that I had a really full and comprehensive knowledge of code, specifically JavaScript languages that are really useful for web design. So then life went on. I had a family and I wanted a career where I could help people with my problem solving skills. And so I started Jorvik Web Dev in an attempt to achieve a work-life balance around my children and earning money, which you know how it is. It sort of works, doesn't quite work. So today, what we'll be doing is we'll be covering web design and UX design, the crossover of there, looking at some laws and principles that how they can assist you in your design process. It just by learning about UX, it removes certain design decisions that you have to make. Then we'll be looking at the planning process, how you actually go from saying, I need a website to actually building it. And then the on-page and off-page SEO. I am scooting over on-page and off-page SEO briefly, simply because some of you may be aware, Helen Reynolds did a webinar about 3-4 weeks ago, and on SEO and ranking in Google, and it's superb, and you should definitely go and watch it. It is her bread and butter, and she's far more well versed in it than I am. So I would recommend going and watching that. And I didn't want to just repeat what she'd already said, so we'll be skimming over that a little quickly. But there's quite a bit in the workbook which I will mention in a little minute. Then I'll be going over some strategies that I would recommend on how to actually build your website, which sounds maybe it sounds a little bit redundant. It's like, why would I need to know how to build my website? But there are efficient ways to do it to make sure it's responsive without having to go back and repeat and back and repeat. And then lastly, how to maintain your website. I've condensed it down into monthly checklist that you can just do, and it not be too overwhelming, and you have a really good grasp of what needs doing, when it needs doing, how to do it, basically. And then that's about it. Hopefully, that's about it. There's a lot to do. And then, as I say, well, as Joseph says, there's 10 minutes or so of Q&A at the end. And yeah, let's crack on. So you have to bear with me because I'm on 2 screens and it doesn't always get my notes. So just to give a little bit of space and some understanding of where we are. So website stats. So 97% of consumers search online for products and services, but only 51% of small businesses actually have a website, which is wild. It's just not the way that it should be. Another startling stat is as well that over 30% of customers won't even consider a business if they don't have a website. So just to give us some background on why it's really important, I think we all know that generally. But the main thing is that the first impressions and trust of a business start online with a well-built, well-designed and easy to use website. Customers want to be able to find what they're looking for, achieving their goals, and then move on with their lives, because that's what we all like. So we're going to start with what every website needs. Sorry, I have to keep changing screens. So first thing, a purpose and a goal. They are two different things. So the purpose is the why. So why does your website exist? And then the goal is the what. So what do you want your users and customers to do on your website? What is it that you want to achieve? The second thing is clear calls to action that, hang on guys, I'll do it like this. Clear calls to action that drive users towards your goal. So basically that's how we can use design, and we can structure the website in a specific way to help customers meet what we're trying to get them to do. The next thing is it needs to be responsive and have easy to use navigation. We've all been on websites that don't work. I was on one recently, I won't name drop, and it was it was absolutely awful, and I couldn't find the information that I wanted. And so I chinned it off and I went on a competitor's website because it was just too frustrating. And that's the exact opposite of what we're trying to achieve here today. So be responsive and have easy to use navigation. Fast loading times, fairly self-explanatory. Don't really need to explain it. It needs to be fast when you load. And it needs to follow good SEO practices. We'll get more into this later, as I say, but SEO isn't just about how you actually rank. There's a whole bunch of other things SEO relate to. It's split into on-page and off-page SEO, as you may know. On-page is your headings, alt text, accessibility, that kind of thing. Off-page is the very techy, a bit more codey. You've got a robots.txt file, you've got some schemas and all sorts of bits and pieces. And then social proof. There's a little bit of debate about where this should be on your page. Personally, I think it should be right in front of your face. As soon as a user is on your website, it should be right there. And then it gives the user a sense of calm, a sense of comfort, that they know they're in the right place to find what they're looking for, because, oh, this person's got 4.9 rating on Google or 5-star rating on Google or whatever it might be. So social proof, very important, right in front of your face. And then lastly, clear contact details. So an easy to find contact form, an email address, but you do need to be mindful of spam. You can get those little am I a human checkers to make sure you don't get spammed all the time. Obviously, this isn't an extensive website. This is kind of an extensive list, sorry. This just skims what is absolutely necessary for pretty much every website. And so what we're doing is have made up a company, just created them, I'll just get all this out, called Bloom and Brew Cafe, just to use as examples as we work our way through. So going back to purpose and goal, what is the purpose of their website? Why did I do the alliteration? Alliteration comes up a lot in this webinar, and I'm regretting it already. So here we go. Bloom and Broom. Nope, forget it. Their purpose is to inform customers about their products and services, as well as to tell them a bit about who they are and convey what type of establishment they hold. So it's very straightforward, very easy to understand, and quite relevant to a lot of folks here, really. It's the purpose of most websites at the end of the day. So you want to be building awareness, trust, and make a connection with the customer before they've actually entered your building, if you have a building, and communicate the ambience of the cafe. That's sort of their specific purpose. What's good about this is that it's broad and it applies long term. So it's something they can keep referring back to, and they don't have to modify their purpose every couple of years or so. So then what are their goals? To get more table bookings and to sell their artisan cafe and tea online. So again, very straightforward, and relates to most people here. The main difference between the purpose and the goals is that goals can be measured, And we'll come back to this again later, but we're going to use key performance indicators, or KPIs, to measure how successful our goals are. And basically, what we want to do is keep our purpose and our goal in mind throughout this process, because it will help us make informed decisions as we go through the design process. So, the inevitable question, which platform? Let me just catch up on my screen. There we go. Which platform, right? What everybody wants to know. I will try to keep this brief. I've also made a little note in my in my notes not to go off on a rant about a certain platform. If there's I think there's people who know me in here, and I have very strong feelings about one of these, and it's just, yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. So let's start with the really obvious one, right? So if you're doing an e-commerce website, you want Shopify. It is very, very good for e-commerce. It's they do have transaction fees depending on the membership level. It isn't great for any additional content. So if you want to keep a blog, for example, so in order to keep your page active, sometimes it depends on really what you're trying to do. It varies. But you may need to pay for a plugin in order to be able to make it a little bit more of a flexible website. But if you're wanting to sell products online, 100% it's Shopify. The next two I'm going to look at are Wix and Squarespace. And these are sort of your DIY websites. Personally, I would recommend Wix over Squarespace, as Wix tends to be a little bit more flexible, has more functionality across the platforms, and integrates better with other platforms as well. I also think that their user side, their client side, so the bit that you would see when you log in, is more straightforward. They've worked quite hard on it recently, and they've had quite a few changes. So they're trying to make it simpler, for sure. The next one I'm going to discuss is WordPress. Now, I know this is a little bit controversial, but I do not like WordPress. I would not recommend it in a million years. It is very good at a lot of things. It is still a powerhouse, and I forget the actual stat, but I think it's still used on the majority of websites across the globe. But personally, I think it's failed to keep up with how users work, with how people like yourselves function when you're building your own websites. It's just not kept up with it. So the primary things that I really don't like, the first thing is that the UI, when you log in, there's so much to look at, and it can go wrong quite easily. And it's just too much. It's confusing, I think. And the second issue I have is that there's a lot of things that are behind paywalls. In order to get the same quality of features that you get in the other builders, you quite often have to pay for the premium version of whichever plugin you're using in WordPress. And then that's the final main issue that I have with WordPress, is that it's very plugin heavy. You need plugins for everything, almost. Which need maintaining. Which can, and then also some plugins don't work well together. So there's problems there. It's just, unless you are doing very specific things, I would just avoid WordPress entirely, quite honestly. There are better options, particularly if you're building your website yourself. And then lastly, Webflow. Webflow was made by developers and designers for developers and designers. If you were to make your own website in Webflow, you would need to really have an understanding of CSS and HTML. That being said, they have absolutely loads of free quality templates and components. Templates they're going to come up a few times in this conversation. There's nothing wrong with templates at all, but they do need checking. What I will say for templates, in Webflow is that you can guarantee that if you use an entire website template, not necessarily just a single component or a section, you can guarantee that the on-page SEO will be correct 95% of the time. I've not come across one that it's not been wrong, where it's been wrong. So there will only be one H1 tag, and then it will follow the pattern. It'll be H2, then H3, then it might go back up to H2 for a new section, then it'll be H3. Rarely do you enter H4, never see an H5 or an H6. Whereas I've had clients that have built their websites using templates on Wix, and you've got multiple H1s, which is a big no-no for SEO purposes, and also screen readers, which again, accessibility we'll get onto later. So Webflow has great templates. I said that I wasn't going to rant. I've not succeeded, have I? Has great templates, but you will need to work with a developer to get Webflow to work. The one last thing I will say about it is that it's got a great client side. It's very, very simple, but not in a patronizing way. Like, you can log in, all your little menus are at the bottom, you click on whichever one that you need, and then you can add a new blog post, you can edit whatever it is. So after all of that, which ones would I recommend? Basically, Wix or Webflow. Both work straight out of the box. There are no paywalls with either. You don't need any plugins with either. You can opt for a couple with Wix, quite honestly. There's some that make it just a little bit better, but essentially you will get top quality, or what would be like the premium level service with, say, like WordPress, just as a basic package with Wix and Webflow for 90% of everything. Obviously, cost is a factor as well. I've not included it because for a few reasons, really. Like, WordPress was really confusing. It also depended on if you were hosting with them or if you were having your own host, and all the different plugins that you can pay for. It was just a bit all over the shop. But essentially, Wix, Shopify, Wix, Squarespace, and Webflow all come within that sort of $15 to $23 a month. Shopify was a little bit more expensive at $29 a month. Plus there are transaction fees as well to consider with Shopify. And then WordPress was all over the shop. It depended if you were hosting with them, as I say. So if you weren't hosting with them, it's about $5 to $10 plus your plugins, or pounds. That WordPress was in pounds. Or if you're hosting with WordPress, it started at £25. So all things to consider. As I say, I would generally recommend WordPress. No, I wouldn't recommend Wix and Webflow. So there's a nice little picture there. So on to the bulk of what we're doing. So how can you guys make your own websites? So we're going to start by looking at UX design. And this is about how a person feels when they're using a product or service. And the good example of UX design, for example, on a website, is a user being able to find the contact form within 2 clicks or less. In this example, the user was able to achieve their goal quickly and without any points of frustration. So it's all about how the customer gets from A to B in as few stages as possible and as easily as possible. UX design, obviously it crosses over with UI design, which then relates to things like navigation, your layout, but it also relates to some things that are sort of SEO based, which are speed and accessibility, and then being consistent with your design throughout. So why do we need UX?
Hannah, just very quickly.
Sorry,
Oh, I thought you're about to do it. Somebody said, "What is UX?" You're probably about to come on to it.
Yes.
Yeah. So wary of acronyms. The layman, of course. Yeah.
Oh yes, of course. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. UX, user experience design. I should have written that. Sorry. User experience design. So it's designing the process that a user would go through in order to either achieve their goal or feel good about a product or service that they've bought or been involved in. Yeah, user experience design. So why do we need it? So first impressions matter. So a user, another stat for you, a user takes less than a second to judge a website's credibility, which is insane. It is not a lot of time. So that first, when they land on your page, needs to be really, really good and top notch. Good UX means more sales and more bookings. So again, it's about how you design the page in order to lead a customer to a call to action. So a call to action would be book a table or sign up to a newsletter or buy a product. So good UX also reduces frustration. So by thinking through that process of how the client or customer gets from A to B, we can empathize, use empathy with them to make sure we have less confusion and fewer drop-off rates. It also boosts trust and reputation. So a smooth and professional site makes your business feel reliable. Mobile design is non-negotiable. I don't think I've said this, I think this comes up later, but another quite important stat for when we're designing is that 60% of users will be on a mobile when they see your website. So I quite often have clients that will make a website on the desktop and it's beautiful and it works well. But then as soon as you go and see it on the mobile, it just doesn't work. Like things will be misaligned. They'll have what we call overflow when something goes off to the sides on a mobile device. And it's not great. So responsive design, we'll come back onto that later. And then obviously accessibility. I think it's something like 1 in 12 men have colorblind issues. And I think it's 1 in 200 women have colorblind issues. And then obviously we have screen readers where you will tab through a website and it will read back what is currently focused on throughout that website. So again, this will come back later, but is really, really important. So UX design, what do we need to remember about it? Essentially, we're all really busy. Customers and users. Oh, so this is the problem. Here we go. I'm just going to stick on this design and I will, sorry guys, because I've got 2 screens and I'm trying to read my notes whilst going along with it. There we go. I'll stick with just this one now. We're all busy. Customers or users will go to a competitor if they can't achieve their goal quickly. Clear design and navigation builds trust with users. They know they can find what they need on your website. You don't need to be a designer to create good user experience. You just need to empathize. So again, thinking back to the site that I was on yesterday, I wanted to find some opening times for a kids club. I couldn't find it, so I decided not to go with that club, basically. And we need to think about how easy is our website to navigate in order to find really important information. Yeah, your customer's main goals. So here, if you remember, I very briefly mentioned our Bloom and Broom. No, I keep saying Broom. That's what it's called now. Bloom and Broom Cafe. This is just an example of a user's journey. So how do they get from arriving on your website to achieving their goal? And this is the sort of process. You absolutely do not have to draw this out. This is just to have a visual representation. But this is just to get you to think about what the actual process is when someone lands on your page. And you can think about it when you're on other people's pages. You can think, okay, how do I achieve my goal on this customer's website, for example? So they land on their homepage. I'll use my mouse to assist. Jessie, she's called. She wants to book a champagne afternoon tea for her mom's 60th birthday. And she is trying to find somewhere special to do that. So she lands on Bloom and Broom, it's now called, their website. And she sees in the main hero image, there is a button that says view menu. And so she clicks on the view menu button. Then she views the menu page, and then she finds the section that says champagne afternoon tea. Because we know at Bloom and Broom that the champagne afternoon tea is one of our best products. So it'll be at the top because that's what we do. And then she clicks the button to see the product page and read more information about it. She decides that this is suitable and it would be really good. And so she wants to book it. And so she clicks on the button that says book afternoon tea. So the button very specifically says exactly what she's going to be pressing on. That's a screen reader issue. And then you fill in the form, she receives a confirmation, and she leaves and continues with her life. So the point of this is just to get you to think about the process that your clients, your customers, whoever it might be, have to go through on your page, on your website to achieve their goals. Right, accessibility. I'm going to brush over this very quickly because it's in your the workbook that comes with it. There's far more detail in there, including some extensions and some tools that you can use to help you figure all this out. So very briefly, it has to be, you've got to do it. It is a legal requirement. I will just summarize this. Basically, you need to have a good contrast in your color palette. So nothing too close. So say, for example, you couldn't have white text on a yellow background. You can't see that. And the websites need to be structured properly with your H1s and your H2s. They are headings. When you are doing your titles in a website builders, you will see it depends on which one you're in, but there'll usually be a drop-down menu. You can select which title you're using. We'll get onto SEO stuff in a little minute. And yeah, accessibility, you need to have it, and make sure that everybody can use your website. So we're on to basically at a point where you can start thinking about how you're actually going to design your website. I would strongly recommend that you sketch your design out. The reason being, there's actually quite a few reasons why. It's fast and it's cheap. That is the first thing. So you're not having to drag and drop. You're not spending hours creating a lovely design that you then get your friend or your colleague to look at. And then they're like, oh, actually, I don't understand this bit. That makes no sense. So you can get feedback very quickly. It also encourages creativity. Like you might have seen images of sometimes UI and UX designers use Post-it notes, or they'll use bits of paper to rearrange and play with structure. You can do that with sketching, and you come out with some more interesting designs for your website rather than just the everyday sort of thing. As I say, you can receive feedback early on, and it focuses on the structure. This is the whole point of the UX design, and then this process, we're thinking about the structure. So we're taking our purpose that we wrote way back at the start of this, and then we're taking the goals, our goals, and we're looking at those and how we can combine them with our user journeys, how we can get our users, so just go back a little minute, how we can get our user journeys to achieve a goal. So Jessie booked the table, which is one of the goals, and then how we can design in a way that will get us to achieve our goals as well as our clients, customers, visitors' goals. So I've just got a couple of examples of the tech. You do not have to be an artist to get this done at all. So very easy, sort of simple way of making sure that the structure is there. This is actually called a sitemap, is what this looks like. But what I've done is then write the details of what might be on that page underneath so that you can understand the structure of the website. A more advanced sort of version of that, these are called wireframes. And it's color coded, so you can see that you've got your buttons. I've color coded the headings so that you can see that you've only got the one H1 tag, you've got multiple H2 at the start of a new section, and then your H3s are there in your cards to show what products you've got. I do fully appreciate, by the way, just as we're on here, I am going over this really, really quickly. The workbook pads all this out a lot more. But I just want everybody to connect the dots all together. And I want to be able to demonstrate the entire process of what a web design sort of, what was included in the web design, so that you can make the informed decision about when you should be hiring somebody and when you can do things yourself. So responsive design. Now I've included these templates in the workbook. What quite often happens, as I mentioned before, a client will buy a template or use a template on Wix or wherever, and it'll work beautifully on desktop, but when you go to the mobile view, it won't work at all. And so what I would encourage you to do is start with your mobile design. The reason for this is it's very, very easy to just think in terms of one column and then to pad it out. So you start with your one column. I want my top section, my hero section, to say this. I'll have a beautiful image and then some SEO details about that later. A call to action at the top, obviously your navigation, and then you filter it down as you go. And what also is good is you can have side by side the mobile and the desktop. I've not included tablet because it just wouldn't fit on the page, quite honestly. But you can see how the designs change. So obviously I've just kind of made them bigger, but essentially the bolding here shows that that's a button. And then you've got the button here instead of the whole thing being a button, essentially. And then you can also design your navigation. And it's really just to, again, get you thinking about how can I make this as easy as possible for visitors on my website to achieve their goals. So check-in point one, and again, this is really more of a workbook point of view. So far we've covered like absolutely loads. I do appreciate there will be quite a few gaps in what I've said. I've skipped over quite a bit, but the workbook will pad it out. It's up to you to decide out of this process so far. You've got to be thinking about your time versus your money versus your skill set. So can you manage the audits and the planning by yourself? Yes, probably, because that's fairly straightforward. What about the UX and the web design? Well, it's relatively straightforward to an extent, but do you have time? Do you have time to sit down and sort of review and learn about UX laws and principles and such? Perhaps not. But it's something just to keep you thinking about, this is what's expected at this stage in the web design process. This is how much of that stage I can do. And this is how much of that stage I would perhaps need to hire somebody to do. Because what would quite often happen is I get clients who come with maybe a bit of a website or a bit of a design, but they don't really understand what is involved in the entire process. And so they're then caught off guard or surprised when they get the invoice, or they're surprised that actually that's not what I do. I don't just give them a random invoice straight away. When we're talking about what's involved and how much work it will be, and I will provide them with a design, or I'll give them a workflow or whatever it might be, they're then surprised at how much is involved. So again, the purpose of this is to provide you with as much information about the web design process so that you can make an informed decision about how much to do for yourself and how much you might need a professional to do if it gets to that. So onwards. Now, SEO. I'm going to skip over a little bit because, as I said, Helen did a superb webinar about 3-4 weeks ago, and I'd recommend you go and see it. So all I've included for on-page SEO is just a checklist. There's an explanation in the workbook. I'm not going to go too much into it because the off-page SEO is far more complicated than on-page. So we will crack on for the moment and ignore that. So what we've done so far is we've decided on our purpose and our goal for the website. We've then come up with a sketch, whether that's the sitemap single line drawing, or we've gone full template wireframe with the templates that are at the back of the workbook. And we've got a design, and we're now ready to pick our platform, and we're ready to build. So I will just highlight a few strategies that I would recommend you start with, and how to actually build to be efficient, therefore save time and money. So mobile first structure, so single columns, simple layout, define the order of the information. So remember, your user or Jessie is going down the page and she's trying to find certain things. What does she need to see at what point? And yeah, check the readability on small screens. Make use of templates and components. So a template, as we say, you can either have a template for a page or you can have a template for a full website. Do be mindful, as I said, you need to check for your on-page SEO stuff. So how many H1s do you have? Are the H2 headings in the correct place? Do they, is it all working as it should, basically? A component is a reusable part. So like your navigation will be a component, buttons are components, your footer. You can also have what are called cards. You'll have all seen them, where they're like little rectangles with information and pictures inside. They're cards, and you can reuse them. The only thing you need to be mindful of when you're doing it is that if you change one component, it will change all of them. So just be careful of that sort of thing. Navigation and information architecture. So there's a lot more about this in the workbook, about how to chunk information together and how you want to limit the amount of choice that is in a navigation so that you don't give your users too much to look at. So stick to 4 to 7 items. Mobile navigation should have large tab areas, and always include your primary call to action in your main navigation. So that could be book a table, or view our menu, or could even be a contact, get in touch. Oh, hang on, there we go. Working sections. So this is main one really that I want to emphasize, because this makes it the most efficient. I started doing this about 6 months ago, and it speeds up your workflow so much. So bear in mind that we are starting with mobile design, right? You can edit your viewport on your builder. All of them do this. So it can be mobile view, tablet view, or desktop view. And then there are sometimes also like large mobile and then large desktop. Don't need to worry too much about that. But working sections. So say if you're having to make your hero, you start with your mobile view, you make your hero. So you'll have your H1 tag, which will have your name and location in it. And then you will add an image and then a call to action, generally is what is in a hero section. Then you will change, change your viewport to tablet view and check that it's still working. So then you might have to change the size of your fonts. You might have to alter the size of your buttons, that kind of thing. And then you change to desktop view and you do the same. So if you work in sections like that, it's far quicker than doing mobile design, extending, tablet design. It's also, I find it a little bit more engaging to do it that way, because when you're just doing responsive design, it's incredibly dull. If you're just expanding stuff, you're changing the size of that, it's boring. I just wouldn't recommend. Design consistency. So you do not necessarily have to go out and get yourself a style guide. That's money that you don't necessarily need to do. But you do need to make sure that your fonts and your colors, your color palettes, and even to an extent your the margins and the padding around, or the space around things within your website, that needs to be consistent. So say, like, try to keep this as simple as possible. If you've got one section on your website and it's got huge white spaces on either side, and then you scroll down to the next section and it's got tiny white spaces, generally that can be a little bit disorientating for the user. There are some examples of when that's okay, but generally try to keep everything consistent as possible. And lastly, accessibility, as we briefly touched on. So adding alt text to your images, it depends on which which builder you're in, but when you upload an image, you'll be able to either click on it, or in like Wix, for example, there's like a media gallery where you can then add alt text to it there, sort of at the side, and the others all work in a similar sort of way. Add alt text that's descriptive, and you can also chuck in some keywords there as well. So say, for example, it's a picture of a cafe. You might want, using our Bloom and Broom folks, you might want to put picture of our cafe in Selby, selling artisan coffee, but be descriptive of whatever the image is showing. So that is the building strategy. So I can't encourage this enough. Mobile first, be consistent with your design, and work in sections. They're the main three here that you want to really focus on. It'll speed it up. Right.
Just quickly before we move on, Hannah, if you somebody had asked what CTA stood for, and somebody in the audience as you got onto a call to action, do you mind just sort of talking through the logic of a call to action really quickly? Because it's when you have big, because you've got a lot of text, and then there's a kind of click here to buy. You are inviting people to take an action, right? So like it's kind of what's the purpose of a page, I suppose. Yeah.
The issue is, I think I've tried to squeeze in too much, and so I've swept over a few things. So a call to action, essentially, I did have this. I think I've taken it out. But anyway, a call to action, essentially, go away, is you are designing a page so that, let's start again. So we have our purpose and our goal for our website, right? And then within that, we have like sub goals and sub purposes. So our service page, for example, or a product page, is there to show what we actually sell, the stuff that you can buy, right? And so you structure that page with a goal in mind. I want my customer to make a booking or to buy X product, right? And so you structure the page with, it will have a picture of the product, it will have a description of the product, it will perhaps have social proof, which also helps with this. And you're structuring the page so that by the time the user scrolls down, they get to the call to action, which will be have a lovely afternoon. I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Using Bloom and Broom, it'll be something like, enjoy a cozy afternoon in our cafe, book your table now. So it's all about building towards what you want the goal of the page to be. So Bloom and Broom was to make more bookings and to sell their coffee and tea online. So we have this lovely page saying how great the coffee is. There's a whole bunch of design things that you can incorporate in there, but essentially it's leading down to the call to action, which, as I say, is to then prompt the user to buy, book, sign up to. That's the call to action. So off-page SEO, this is super techy. I will briefly explain what these all are. Essentially, you need all of them, and I've described them in far more detail in the workbook. I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to scoop through these quickly. Let's start by just saying, rather than me going on about each of them, what I will say, robots.txt file, most builders will do this for you. You don't generally need to worry about it. I have said in the workbook, you can add something to it. It's very, very simple. You literally just copy and paste, and it is to stop, particularly in this day and age, certain countries from having cheeky looks at our stuff, and you can block certain crawl agents. So I would encourage you to do that. As it says, it just tells search engines what pages they can look at and which pages they should ignore. Literally it. You might have to tick a box depending on which builder you're in. Schema markups, these are, again, some builders do this for you, but you need to check that they're doing the right ones. This is very techy. I won't go into it, but essentially, as it says, it tells Google about your business, such as opening times, location, etc. Google Analytics and Google Search Console, free tools that show people, show you how people are using your website and show how you're searching up in, how you're showing up, sorry, in the Google Search Console, in the Google searches. You do need all of these. As I say, it's in the workbook. If you are confused by anything, I've also put in the workbook, please do just drop me an email and we can book something. I've said you can book in for a free 30-minute chat just to help you with this stuff, because if it goes wrong, it can be an absolute disaster. But as I say, in the workbook, very clearly explained. So we're just going to scoot over this for now. Legal compliance, again, really not very interesting. It is just a checklist. And you can, there's free resources to be able to create these. And then what you need to do is create a page and then just copy and paste each bit that you need. So your privacy policy, business information, complaints handling policy, consumer rights, terms and conditions. They are all individual pages on your website. Just use one of these free resources. You can use ChatGPT, but be mindful that you need to obviously get that checked, and always ask a legal expert to have a little check as well. And make those new pages, clear pricing, an email address. A good way to avoid being spammed, because again, people can crawl your website, find your email address and spam you with garbage. You can put your email address in as an image. And well, I mean, AI is making it a little bit more of a challenge, but if you have it as an image, users can still read the email address, but crawlers won't necessarily be able to access the text, if that makes sense. And then an easy to find contact page. That's very straightforward. So we're going to skip over a few little bits and we're going to jump to what you can do. Skip over that bit. How you can maintain your website. As I say, don't worry about these bits. They are in the workbook. They are a little bit more well explained. So basically here, these are the things that you can do to keep your website active. Your website is never done. There is a monthly checklist that you can do. So a blog is a really good way to keep your website up to date and active. You can also update your images for any products, update the text. You can also do monthly SEO audits. So that will tell you if there are any broken links, if you've got the wrong headings somewhere. And as I say there, you can sign up for, because I mum and running my own business, I forget stuff literally all the time. And so having the prompt, mine's actually a weekly prompt, but you can set SEMrush up to do a monthly prompt and send you a free report every month. And it will have a look at your website. It will assess what's good and what's bad, what's working and what isn't working, and give you some tips on what to do. However, SEMrush is limited because it's very in-depth, and in order to get anything of any worth, you do need to pay for it. So don't do that. I use the SEMrush report as a prompt to then go and use SE Optima, which is free and far more comprehensive. which is a little cheeky, but got to save money where you can. Have a look at your Google Analytics, and again, workbook. Maintenance that you can do yourself. So when the audit report comes in, it will show you what's broken, and you just go through and fix it all, basically. Or you can decide that you just don't have the time, and you can provide the report to a dev and say, hey, this is what I need looking at. Please, can you crack on with that? And then they will. And also make sure you're testing it on different platforms regularly. It's important to do so. What's this? Don't know. Go away. Right. Again, we're just going to go over this quickly. Following on from, I'm just trying to decide. Yeah, we will. We'll just finish off with this. So in order to make sure that your website is being successful and is performing as it should be, we can follow these things called key performance indicators. These measure lots of different things. You can find these out from your Google Analytics and the audit reports that you will get. And it will tell you this kind of information. So the idea is that you pick 2, maybe 3 that would relate back to your purpose and your goal, and then monitor them over a 6-month period and see how they're improving and see what you can do to improve or reduce depending on which KPI that you've just decided to follow. And then what I will say as well, actually, there are tracking sheets at the back of the workbook so that you can monitor them. So same with the SEO reports as well. They can all be tracked at the back. And then lastly, these are some of the tools that I highly recommend that you have a little look at. If you are going to only look at a couple, I would recommend, obviously we're going to use, oh no, come back. We're going to use SEO Optima for our SEO report audits. If you want any inspiration or help with design, these are all really handy. Laws of UX is a great website and helps with things like chunking and how to manage the psychology behind designing a website. And then these all down here, the 2 Google Rich Results Test and Google Search Console, they will tell you if those off-page SEO bits that I briefly touched are actually in place and are working. So that is more or less me coming in. So basically, in summary, plan before you build. Big thing. It will make it a lot quicker later on. And that includes your things like your headings. So if you remember that wireframe one that I had with the color-coded headings, the H1 and the H2, if you do it that, it'll make it quicker when you go into your builder. Make things accessible and responsive as you go. So don't leave it all to the end. You start with your mobile design and build out, rather than going all the way down to the bottom of the mobile and then going back up and doing tablet and doing it that way. Be wary of templates, check everything, utilize free resources, do the boring bits, which are your analytics and your compliance stuff, your checklists. And please do get in touch free of charge. I've crammed an awful lot in here. I'm sure you've all got really good questions, which we will do in a little minute. And yeah, get in touch if you need any help. There we go.
Thank you very much, Hannah.
Yeah.
Very well done. There's a lot to go through,
Mm.
and I think you could talk about this for hours and hours. Everybody's use case is going to be different, and there is just a lot to go through. We've had a very engaged audience. So I have got questions lined up for you already.
I am ready.
We've been teasing this workbook, which I didn't want to post ahead of time because I didn't want people reading it instead of paying
Oh,
attention to you. I'm going to post a link to that in the chat now.
okay.
And obviously that'll come out to you in the email along with a link to the recording, and we'll link in some other upcoming stuff that we're doing as a growth hub to help you with digital things. So And Emma's been on the call, putting her email in the chat. Emma in my team is looking after kind of the business facing parts of our program. So if you are kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed and lost, please do come and speak to us. Come and speak to Emma. She'll recommend some things. I'm imagining Emma's hearing this and going, oh no, this is going to be an influx of people, but that's her job. So she's there to help you. And very gladly will. So I've just posted a link to that workbook there. So please do have a look through that. I think you'll find it really useful because you've put it together in a really nice way that kind of allows people